taking place on the 28th of July 2021, and the time is just after 10 o'clock. So welcome everybody. I'll just hand over to Layla now to go through how the meeting will be run according to the current regulations. Layla.
Thank you, leader. I'll now pass on to my team leader, who will actually tell you how to run the meeting.
Thank you very much. Morning, members. Yes, I am here just for today. Unfortunately, won't be joining you for your meetings next week. It is the Executive Advisory meeting on the 4th of August, and today's meeting is being recorded, and a recording will be made available on the Council's website within the next 2 working days. Just to say that it is an advisory meeting, and members of the Executive Advisory meeting will make recommendations for the leader to determine at the end of each item. Just to say, if there is a technical problem, we will have to adjourn the meeting, but hopefully we will stay connected throughout the course of the meeting. If you do need to get attention of the leader to speak, if you could use the chat box, please, that would be much better. And the format of today's meeting will be as per the agenda before you. So I'll hand back now to the leader to do the usual roll call and to make sure that everybody can see and hear, and I will confirm that I can see and hear everybody loud and clear. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Andrew. Right, starting with the Deputy Leader, Councillor Slocum.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Leader. Jill Slocum, Deputy Leader, Inward Investment and Growth. I can see and hear everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Caswell.
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Mike Caswell. I can clearly hear and see you all.
Thank you. Councillor Lance Duddridge.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Councillor Lance Duddridge. I can see and hear everything clearly. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Gilling.
Good morning, Leader and everybody. Yes, my name's Councillor Andrew Gilling. I can hear and see everybody clearly. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Healy.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Mark Healy. I can clearly see and hear everything. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but by no means least, Councillor Janet Keane.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Janet Keane. I confirm I can see and hear everything very clearly. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just go round management team here today. Deputy Chief Executive, Mr. Bamsey.
Good morning, everybody. Doug Bamsey, Deputy Chief Executive. I confirm I can hear and see everything.
Thank you. Mrs. Turner.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Alison Turner, Strategic Director and Section 151 Officer, and I can confirm I can see and hear everything today.
Thank you. Mrs. Wellman.
Good morning, everyone. Melanie Wellman, Assistant Director for Legal and Monitoring Officer, and I can confirm I can see and hear everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Claire Thorne.
Claire Thorne, Corporate Relations Manager. I can see and hear everything. Thank you.
And then we have report authors with us, Alison Monteith.
Hello, yeah, Alison Monteith, Finance Manager. I can see and hear everything. Thanks.
Thank you. And we're joined by Leader of the Opposition Groups, Councillor Brian Smedley and Councillor Bill Revens. Welcome to you both. And I'm sure we will have other people joining us during the course of the meeting who will drop in and see what fun we're having today. I can also say that I can see and hear all of you as well, very clearly on my super fast broadband, which is quite a difference. Okay, without further ado then, we'll move on with apologies for absence.
Thank you very much, Leader. There are no apologies today.
Right, item number 2, declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? Nope. Good. Moving on, agenda item 3, urgent business. I have none notified to me. 4, public speaking time. I don't believe we've had anyone notify us that they wish to speak, which takes us into agenda item 5, which is the Treasury Management Outturn Report for 2021. We're joined by Mrs. Monteith, who will go through in detail. I'll just give you a quick overview Generally speaking, the year has been quite good for us. Not as one would have hoped, but clearly far better than we had anticipated during the year with the current COVID situation ongoing. So without further ado, members will note that the report is to recommend to me and to recommend to council. So without further ado, Mrs. Monteith.
Hiya, thank you. I'll just quickly present my screen so it's a little bit easier to go through the report with you, if that's okay. Can people see my screen?
Yep, it's a lovely screen, thank you.
Okay, so this is the Treasury Management Outturn Report for 2020-21. The Audit and Standards Committee approved the Treasury Management Strategy, but it's this, the Executive's responsibility to monitor Treasury Management. Quarterly, you get a report on Treasury Management, but this, in order to fulfil our obligations under the SIPFL Code, is an annual report that has to go to the Executive and then recommended on to full council, as you said. So I'll just take you through some of the tables because hopefully you've read the wordy bits. So our Treasury position at the 31st of March 2021, if we start with borrowing, our borrowing position isn't a lot different to the year before. So you can see I've split it between HRA borrowing and and general fund borrowing, and between PWLB and non-PWLB. So our HRA borrowing really hasn't changed at all during the year. We didn't spend an awful lot on capital last year that needed funded by borrowing, so that's mainly why. Our total general funds debt has also not changed at all, even though we have funded some capital notionally by borrowing, but that's because we've used internal resources to fund those. So we'll have a look at that in a minute. So overall, our actual borrowing position is not much changed from the previous year. In November last year, the PWLB did publish a response to its consultation about its lending terms. It dropped interest rates on PWLB borrowing by 1%, which has made them very favourable. But it did set some new rules that you cannot borrow funds in order to buy commercial property or invest in commercial property. We had already done most of our commercial borrowing by then, although we hadn't outsourced the borrowing. So there is only one purchase that actually is caught within this. So the final purchase that we did last year, we can't fund by PWLB borrowing. It's around about £10 million, but it's not an issue for us at all because there's plenty of other mechanisms to borrow from. It does mean that we are now questioned when we do try to take out PWLB borrowing, and we have to be very clear about what we're borrowing for. You can borrow for service delivery purposes, housing, regeneration, as is said in my report here, but specifically not for commercial type purposes. So our capital finance requirement represents our underlying need to borrow. So this is the capital that we have spent over the years that is notionally funded by borrowing, but we might not have actually taken out physical external borrowing to cover it. So for the HRA, the capital financing requirement is, like I say, not an awful lot changed from the previous year because not much capital was funded by borrowing. 53 million of it is externally borrowed, all through the PWLB, and £6 million of it is internally borrowed, so that's from within our own revenue funds. It's just borrowed. The general funds capital financing requirement increased by about £10 million, so that is the commercial borrowing that we did, the commercial purchase that we made during the year. But you can see our actual external borrowing hasn't increased. We've borrowed all of that internally. So our options for that £10 million is to either continue to borrow internally from our own balances, or to borrow from other local authorities, which is really cheap at the moment, or there will be other funding mechanisms, but that £10 million we can't borrow from the PWLB, so we need to make sure we keep records of that. Excuse me. So as at the 31st of March, our investment position was not an awful lot changed from the previous year. It's not an overly exciting report, this one. We haven't got too many changes from the previous year, which is kind of nice because it means, you know, our treasury management position is relatively settled. Our investments we're keeping either very, very short, which is these here. So we keep money in money market funds, which we can access every day, and on-call funds, which we can access every day. So we need those really short. We need between £5 and £9 million on call at any one time to make sure we pay our precepts and things like that. So these figures do fluctuate depending on at what point in the month we look at these. But the figure at the bottom of our pooled funds are our funds that are invested on a longer term basis because we get much better interest rates for those. So our investment activity during 2021, we did have to revise our budgets down at revised budget time because obviously of COVID and the whole economic crisis kind of thing that went with that. Interest rates were really low anyway, and so we knew it was going to be hard to achieve. But as the leader says, it's actually quite positive really, because I think we only reduced our budget by that 200,000, which is not huge on that budget, and we did manage to meet those budgets at the end of the year. So, you know, quite positive on investment interest, I think. So you can see, first of all, our internal investments, so the investments that we look after, which is the money market funds and the on-call funds. We don't get an awful lot of investment from those because that is on-call, because we can access it every day. We're literally not getting a very good rate at all. So you can see the average rate we got was 0.07% last year on those. Compared to a benchmark of 0.1. So we're almost there on that. Our fixed rate funds, we don't keep much in fixed rate funds because they're difficult to access because you've got to give 95 days notice and they don't give you very good interest rate. So that 0.45% was a historic rate from the year before, something that we had fixed out. So we won't get that rate again, which is why that looks a lot better than our benchmark. So our pooled funds are where we've got our surplus investment money, and we've fixed it out into pooled funds, which are longer term funds. So we're getting much better interest rates on those. So in total, we've got about £31 million fixed out in these. We can recall that money at any time. Some of these funds, we don't have to give any notice. The property fund, they ask for about 3 months notice, but we don't intend to recall those back. They're not short term funds anyway. We're keeping them for the longer term, as long as they're performing. So last year, actually, they did perform really well, considering the 1920 rate. There's not a lot of reduction on those. Schroeder obviously took a bit of a hit there, but the rest of them are performing really, really well, especially the UBS. Now, some of these funds are property funds, like the CCLA property funds. Some are equity, like UBS. So different types of funds will earn different type of interest rates, and we make sure that our funds are split out over the different types of fund. So not all of our money is in property or in equity. You can see there's some diversified funds here, and they have a little bit of everything. So they are, as the name suggests, more diverse. You don't necessarily get quite such a good interest rate on those, but you're spreading your risk of putting everything into property and equity. So our budget for loan interest paid, we budgeted for paying about £1 million on the general fund, but we only paid £500,000, but that's because I didn't externalise any general fund borrowing. We kept all of our borrowing internal, and we were able to do that because we had very positive cash flow last year, which is a mixture of not spending, what we were intending to spend on some of our capital when projects didn't go forward, but also the forward funding of grants from the government for COVID meant that our balances were quite high at times, and we didn't need to fix out borrowing for so long. We will be fixing out more borrowing this year for sure. So that budget will go back up again. So we did make savings on the budget from the original one, but we came out about what we expected at revised. So overall, the impact on the budget was, like I say, not particularly exciting, pretty negligible. And overall, the report has no surprises, nothing we need to worry about. So that's about all I've got to say, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Members, any questions on what is a reasonably bright report? And thank you to Alison and the Treasury Management team. I think there's probably one other person for the report and for their due diligence shown throughout the year. Thank you very much. Councillor Slocum.
Thank you, Leader. It's not really such a question. It's just to thank the team, really. I think we're looking at a fairly good state of affairs, I think. And I think this goes to show with your prudent savings and your interest and dealing with things. So I'd like to thank you for this. I've always said this. I wish you were looking after my situation. Not that I got very much, but well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keane.
Thank you. Now that the Secretary of State has made a decision about the reorganisation, what is the legal position with regard to our assets, material things as well as cash? Are we allowed to continue using or disposing or acquiring as we choose until the end of this council's life? Or are we restricted so that there is something to hand over to the new body?
Thank you. I think Melanie is going to answer this or give us some information on this. But my understanding is until we've received direction, we carry on in a relatively normal way. Mrs. Wellman.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case, Leader. Basically, the MHCLG and the government can make a direction at some point. That could be in the structural change order, or it could be in a separate direction sort of later on. And that direction can set limits on how much you can spend without consulting with the new authority. But that tends to be later down the line. So I wouldn't anticipate that being until sort of February time next year. But I mean, that is something that will be up for discussion between the councils and the MHCLG.
Thank you.
And equally, we don't know whether it's going to be a shadow authority or a continuing authority, and we won't know that until that time as well. And also, when the shadow authority or the continuing authority is in place, then we would clearly discuss with them as part of the moving forward to the new authority. Any other comments or questions? Mrs. Monteith, anything else you wish to say that you've suddenly remembered?
No, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. In which case then, members, I'll ask if there are any people who are opposed to me endorsing the report and forwarding it to full council for note, or any abstentions. Please speak now. Mr. Melchiorich then.
Thank you very much, Leader and members, and that is a unanimous recommendation to you, Leader. So if you're happy to just confirm that the recommendation now will see this report going into full council, and that's on the 4th of August. Thank you.
Yeah, and I am happy so to do. Thank you. Moving on then to agenda item 6, which is the self-build and custom built homes supplementary planning document, SPD for short, and Councillor Jill Slocum.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you. This is a really good report in front of you. And the purpose of this report is to formally adopt the self-build custom built SPD document. And additional guidance is attached, as you'll see, with Appendix A and 1 and 2, sorry. This is to give clarity on the design location guidance for self-builders and plus their agents. It's had extensive consultation over a 6 weeks period, and was finalised by our planning and policy group, which obviously I do chair that group, and we extensively went through this. So I think it's important to have this policy in place for the future, and I would request that I can move the recommendation after the comments have been made, Leader, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Redding. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll just give a bit of background on the report and the recommendation. So yeah, in terms of background, many of you remember that we adopted our local plan back in 2019, and that included some key new policies around self-build, seeking to address the issue over supply of self-build plots across the district. And that was in direct response to a new duty from government to keep a register of demand for self-build and to grant sufficient plots within 3 years for the numbers we identify in our register. So new policies were put in place to try and address that and essentially allow for self-build exception sites to come forward, not dissimilar to how we have local affordable housing sites come forward by exception. So the appendix includes the full policy wording. I'm not going to go through the local plan policies, but it's fair to say that the feedback we had when those policies were in was that they were positive, more schemes were coming forward, but across the board, members, applicants, agents, officers themselves were keen to have some additional guidance to assist with interpretation of those policies. They're new policies. They're relatively innovative in terms of how we deliver self-build. So it was felt that there would be good to have some further guidance. So we went about preparing the guidance document, engaged with parish councils through parish training events, engaged with agents through the agents panels we have, and the end result is the document you see in front of you in the appendix. That has also been through the statutory 6-week public consultation, which we undertake. I won't go through the detail of the document. Obviously, I'm happy to answer any questions on it if anyone's got any queries. In summary, it sort of addresses key aspects of the policies. So, actually defining clearly what self-build and custom build is. There's a lot of uncertainty sometimes about people's understanding of what self-build development is and what it's considered to be. It gives guidance on what sites would be considered to be well related in terms of meeting some of the tests of the policies, well related to settlements in terms of meeting that test, and also how we make judgments about the local demand for plots, and crucially what satisfies local connection for rural areas. So the less sustainable rural areas where we're exceptionally allowing some infill plots, there's requirement for occupants to have a local connection, similar to local letting policies for affordable housing. So it gives some clarity around the interpretation of the policy for that. And it also includes some guidance on infill development in the countryside. That's a new aspect of the policy introduced through the examination of the local plan. So it includes some illustrations to set out what we would consider to be an infill plot, what we wouldn't consider to be an infill plot. So that's been through the various processes. Overall feedback from parishes and others is that it's good to have clarity on these issues, and we've honed the document through the consultation process in consultation with the policy group team, and so the intention is the recommendation to exec is essentially to adopt it so that it is a material consideration. So it will be a material consideration alongside the local plan policies when we come to decide applications. And the idea is that will provide a much clearer steer for self-builders bringing forward schemes, as well as officers and members having to make decisions. So that's the purpose of the document. As Jill's therefore set out, now it's gone through the formal processes. The recommendation is to formally adopt the SPD, so in accordance with the regulations, and also give delegated authority for final formatting, graphical changes, that sort of thing.
Right, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure development management and all members will be quite grateful for the clarity. It's been a bit of a grey area up until now, which has caused a bit of angst every now and again with applicants, and I think we'll all welcome this. Members, any comments or questions?
Leader, if I may.
Certainly, Councillor Gilling.
A couple of questions I'd like to put to Andy if possible. Firstly, is this, whilst I've got nothing against self-build at all, I actively would encourage it if possible, but so long as it doesn't conflict with any potential schemes that are in the pipeline at the moment, then that could create a bit of a challenge for some of the developers that are actually building out the already granted or consented sites, if you have one plot in amongst that, that could then upset the actual equilibrium of the site itself. And I'm concerned that that doesn't create an impasse that some developers may then turn on their heels and walk away from it.
Yeah,
I think there's a real risk of that potential.
Yeah, it's a fair point. It's a fair point around that. And when we went through the examination process, there's two aspects of our policy really. There's part of a policy which refers to a certain percentage of or provision of some self-build on allocated sites, which is encouraged. So that is encouraged by our policy. And there's the other aspect of a policy, which is what the guidance addresses, which is essentially 100% self-build sites coming forward on their own. Now, what happened at the examination was numerous concerns were raised about the issue over holding up delivery if a house builder has to work round, for want of a better word, self-build developers. It can cause all sorts of issues around health and safety on sites and the like. And actually, what we're finding in terms of demand is that the majority of the demand in our district is people who want to bring forward single self-build plots. They don't want to be part of a wider allocation development. They want a collection of self-build homes or to be a single self-build plot. So the policy is very much geared towards that and less towards provision on allocated sites. It does still encourage it where possible, because there might be situations where it doesn't hold up or cause problems for the house builder, but there isn't an obligation on that. It's just encouraged. The main route by which, as a district, the policy is looking to deliver self-build is on 100% self-build sites delivered for that purpose. So it shouldn't. It means that it shouldn't lead to any issues around that. There are other councils which are very strictly specify a percentage of plots on wider allocations, which is causing issues, both in terms of people actually wanting those plots when they're marketed, because the demand's often not there, and in terms of it causing issues over the phasing of the site. So we're trying to avoid that by how the policies have been worded and how the guidance is geared towards 100% self-build plots.
Thank you. Yep.
Thank you for that reassurance. Any other members? Comments or questions? No? Okay. Councillor Slocum then.
Oh, thank you very much, Leader. I think Mr. Redding can be well assured that the reason there's not many questions is because his report was very clear and concise, and I think it has given us absolute clarity to what has been a slightly confusing issue. So I would like to thank Andy Redding for this very, very much, and I would ask that we, through you, Leader, we can move the two recommendations before you. Thank you.
Okay, I will ask the Executive Advisory Meeting if there are any abstentions or objections to the two recommendations before you. No. Mr. Melchiorish.
Thank you very much, Leader and members. That appears to be a unanimous recommendation across to you, Leader, to recommend that the self-build and custom build SPD is adopted at full council, and that again will be a recommendation to full council next week on the 4th of August, and also to give delegated authority for any minor amendments.
Yep, I'm happy to endorse the recommendations. Thank you. And thank you very much, Mr. Redding. Moving on then to agenda, excuse me, agenda item 7, which is the Bridgewater Cycling Charter. And again, that's Mr. Redding, but first of all, I shall go to Councillor Caswell.
Thank you, Leader. This is, to be quite quick, is the initiative by the Bridgewater Area Cycling Campaign, the BACC, to have a cycling charter throughout Bridgewater and some other areas, which I fully support. I must admit, I really do support this. We must, for our children and for the safer transport throughout the town, have a safe cycling areas and safe cycling. And because of the recent accidents on the C182 where I live, and there's where somebody was killed cycling, and there has been various other accidents with cyclists. It has become more apparent to me that we really do need to have some kind of charter and support this. I will ask Mr. Redding, it seems to be his show today, that to go through it for you. But I fully support it, and I'll wish to propose the recommendation at the end. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Caswell. Yeah, I'll just give a bit. I haven't got a huge amount to add to what's been set out, but I'll just go through the charter briefly and some of the background. Bridgewater Area Cycling Campaign are essentially a local group which promotes safe, convenient cycling. They're essentially looking for better cycling provision, and that's across the board, whether it's improved cycle lanes, improved awareness of safety, improved cycle storage, the full remit really in terms of when it comes to cycling. They put together this charter and have been asking organisations to endorse it, essentially as a means of trying to support everyday cycling within Bridgewater. I won't go through the full text; it's detailed in the report, but just to pick out some aspects of the charter. I mean, it is usefully, I suppose, quite a high-level statement, which sort of encompasses all aspects around cycling. So it essentially sets out that they want to see Bridgewater an area where people can cycle safely, where it's convenient to use a bicycle to go to the shops, where people can feel confident on the roads, and where it becomes essentially the more natural choice for everyday journeys within the town. They also consider that obviously improved cycle provision has wider benefits in terms of reducing congestion, achieving the key aim around carbon neutrality, and ultimately improving mental well-being and physical fitness. I think they're all sort of aspects which aren't really contended really. Very good points to make in terms of a high-level charter. I mean, from a point of view, officers have obviously reviewed the charter, and to be honest, it aligns fully with the direction of the council. Our climate emergency action plan has specific actions around promoting active travel, which includes walking and cycling, and improving infrastructure and making a more cycle-friendly culture within Sedgemoor. Through the local plan, when we get development proposals, we've got specific policies seeking to improve cycle connectivity, active travel connectivity, and our health and wellbeing strategy itself also highlights its importance in terms of healthy lifestyles and improved wellbeing. On a wider point, we've obviously been engaged with county over the last few years in terms of the sort of step change that has been in government over active travel. So there's been the emergency response, COVID response, which has tried to improve social distancing. There's more active travel funds, and of course things like the HPC mitigation monies, which are being used to deliver cycle improvements across the town. And that is continuing with further projects in the pipeline. It's also a key part of our town improvement, town investment strategy plan is to include walking and cycling aspects to it as well. So overall, it was considered to align with what the council's objectives are. Importantly, the charter doesn't set out any specific interventions or policies, so it's not saying you'd change a certain road this way to enable it or change it this way. It rightly says that sort of is for discussion at the project level about how specific schemes should be implemented. So I think it's useful that it steers away from relatively strict aspects about how you'd be looking to implement it. It just keeps it as a high-level charter. So on that basis, the recommendation from executive is for Sedgemoor to indicate support for the charter.
Thank you. Members, any comments or questions? It's worth going back in time and remembering that Sedgemoor used to have the highest cycle use of any area within Somerset at one point, and many of the businesses and people going to businesses used to use cycles to get there. So it's continuing the tradition that we have. Councillor Slocum.
Thank you, Leader. I think that remembering this is a high-level charter, I think that having a young grandson who wants to cycle to school and everything else, and in Bridgewater at the moment, it's very, very worrying. And I think whilst we all would love to get on our bikes and go, I have to say I'm a little nervous at that thought at the moment. I really am. But I welcome this. It is a great move forward. And I think that we have to have something in place before we can implement it. It's not going to be an easy job in the Bridgewater area to implement safe cycling. There's no doubt about that. Even as a pedestrian, you're not safe on the path because of cyclists who obviously don't want to be on the road. I get that. But this is a good step forward. It's a start, and I welcome this and support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smedley.
Just want to say that Bridgewater Town Council very much supports this, and I hope Sedgemoor will as well, clearly, because it's something that is the future for a town like Bridgewater, to make sure that cycling provision is included everything. In terms of transport, we have a transport forum on the town council which has been working with the area cycling campaign for some time, and we're looking at making cycling a key feature of next year's themed tourism brochure as well. So I hope you do take this on board and support it to the amount it deserves.
Thank you. Councillor Keane.
Thank you. I entirely support this. It's good in every way. Would it be within our power to try and persuade, we can do no more than persuade adult cyclists to take some sort of insurance, so that we know that there are dangers and accidents? Jill mentioned that as a pedestrian, with adults cycling on pavements because the roads are dangerous, sometimes we take our life on our hands just coming out of our own gardens. So at the moment, I think a cyclist is not obliged to have any form of insurance. But there's nothing to stop us, I believe, to actually persuade and ask adults if they would consider this.
No, and I think best practice does state that cyclists should take every precaution that they can to ensure their safety and the safety of others when using roads. It's for others to enforce that they use the roads, but clearly that's quite difficult in certain circumstances. And I think adopting this policy or charter is a good step forward. We can also, in meetings with government ministers, mention the fact that they ought to look again at a statutory notice asking or insisting that cyclists take out insurance, but we can't enforce something at the moment that doesn't exist, but we can suggest, and that is good practice already, and we should encourage people to do that. Any other comments or questions?
May I add a comment or two as well in this one? It's been a bone of contention with me for a long time, because we're all talking about urban cyclists at the moment. The rural issue is equally powerful. We get swarms of lycra, or mammals, as we now affectionately refer to them as, coming down country lanes in small groups and refusing to make any access for vehicles of any description, be they agricultural, be they private vehicles. Nevertheless, they do tend to clog up the country lanes that we've got around here, and especially if there's water on either side of that country lane, that can create an issue of its own, and they are very unsympathetic to any other forms of transport. I don't wish to deny the right to cycle anywhere, but I would agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Keane in that we need some kind of legislation to make sure that these bicycles are indeed registered and indeed insured in case of incident, and so there's some degree of identification that can be maintained. I can only support that, but I will nevertheless support the recommendation to the scheme.
Yeah, I think until we've adopted this charter, I think it's a first step on the road to making the roads and everywhere a safer place for cyclists, which ultimately will bring benefits to all. Councillor Bill Revens.
Thank you, Councillor McGinty. Yeah, just wanted to come back on that point. I don't deny that some cyclists cycle in an antisocial way, but equally well as somebody who does cycle regularly, there are some drivers who don't drive in a particularly social way towards cyclists as well. I've had some near misses from people driving poorly. I wonder if we could recognise that it's individuals that behave poorly rather than characterise groups with using such phrases as mammals or whatever it was that we just heard. We, I think, need to be respectful of all different road users and make sure that we can and make sure that people can get about our district safely, whatever means of transport they choose to use. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we can only agree. It just does need to be a safe environment. And as I said, I think adoption of this charter would be a good step on the ladder to making that happen. Members, any other comments or questions? In which case, Councillor Caswell has proposed the recommendation. I shall put it to the advisory committee. Are there any dissenters or abstainers? Please speak now. Mr. Melhuish.
Thank you very much, Leader and members, and that's a unanimous recommendation. Over to you, Leader, to confirm that you're happy for giving your support to this Bridgewater Cycling Charter. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm happy to confirm that I'm willing and able and happy to endorse the Bridgewater Cycling Charter, and on the strength of that, I shall get my bicycle out. There being no further business, members, I'd just like to thank you for your attendance today. I would have liked to say go and enjoy the weather, but at the moment it's absolutely tipping down with rain here, so enjoy what weather you can when it's available. So thank you very much. No further business. I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.